Hey guys, I wanted to do a video. Earlier today, I had a conversation on Facebook with someone, and they brought up a Catholic scholar, and I was kind of intrigued by it, and I looked at it just a little while ago, and this thought came to my mind. I've said this often, and here's what I want to address. Here's the topic of this video: is in the world of Protestant apologetics, oftentimes Protestant apologists will cite Catholic scholars against Catholic apologists, but will completely dismiss and ignore and reject the what the Catholic scholars actually say in addition to the bit that they want to cite. And this isn't something I have against these Protestant apologists necessarily as people. I mean, Gavin Ortland, who I love Gavin. I watch all of his videos, but he does this, and this frustrates me. He'll cite Catholic scholars to try to prove a point, like, say, for example, and this is the topic I was reading on today, that there wasn't a monogal episcopacy in Rome in the first century, or that, icon veneration was a development, or Marian doctrine was a development. Gavin will cite Catholic scholars on things like this to try to prove that these things were developments, or try to prove that they weren't early, but then completely ignore the Catholicism that scholar represents. It's like, hey, look, this is a person of integrity. This is a scholar who's honest and who has integrity, and he's willing to admit these things about the early church. But the Catholicism that they embrace, I don't even consider it worthy of consideration. The only Catholicism that I'm willing to engage with is the rad-trad, fundamentalist, high infallibilism of the Catholic apologists. That's the only one. That's the only kind of Catholicism that I want to engage with. And that's the only kind of Catholicism that Gavin Ortland engages with. That's the only kind of Catholicism that any Protestant apologist engages with. And why do they do that? Well, I want to be careful in the way I say this because I want to be accurate in the way I say this. But there is a deep-seated conservatism in these men and women, to where I think this is what's going on. It's like, if something's true, it has to be the conservative truth. If Catholicism is true, it has to be conservative Catholicism. And if I'm considering like a more progressive or a more nuanced Catholicism, well, clearly that's not true. The only kind of Catholicism that can be true, the only kind of truth that's true, because truth is conservative. I think that's where they're coming from. So they're happy to cite a very, progressive, nuanced Catholic who's willing to admit these things to prove their point, but they're not willing to consider the Catholicism of these people, as if to say, like, yeah, these people are really great scholars, they have integrity, they're honest, but also at the same time to say, like, they're self-contradicting themselves. They're foolish for being Catholic. They should know better. They shouldn't be Catholic. The things they are saying disprove their own faith. Like, whoa, that's... I mean, I know you're not being disrespectful if Gavin's watching this or if any of these people. I know you're not being disrespectful to these scholars, but not taking seriously their faith in Catholicism as a real, actual explanation of the Catholic faith, it actually is objectively, not subjectively, but it's objectively like disrespectful to not consider and engage with that Catholicism. So what prompted this today? It was a discussion about the monoepiscopacy in Rome in the first century. And I was talking with a guy on Facebook, and he shared a quote from Dr. Robert Eno, a Catholic priest who studied and wrote a book on the rise of the papacy, the rise of the early papacy. And he shared a quote that basically said, if there wasn't a monoepiscopacy in the early first century, then how can we talk about there actually being like a bishop of Rome and succession of Rome and a valid papacy? And that was the only portion of the quote he shared. And the quote was very provocative. And so I was intrigued by it. And I looked up the book, and there's a free version on Internet Archive. So I was reading through it. And sure enough, that's an accurate quote. He was very provocative in the way he asked that question. And he does lean towards the idea that there was not a monoepiscopacy in Rome in the first century. But then he provides a very plausible explanation of how, nevertheless, that doesn't disprove the papacy as a valid development, a real divinely instituted office in the church, and he presents this model for understanding. He says, look, yeah, you could have a situation where in the first century in Rome, you have a collection of leaders who together collectively kind of carry this Petrine authority and collectively are kind of like the bishop authority. There isn't a single bishop yet, but still there was throughout this period of time, like one of those leaders, like Clement or Anacletus or Linus, who was sort of like the leader of the group of leaders who was in charge of like external relations with the other churches, who they certainly weren't acting like the Pope or like a singular bishop, but nevertheless they had this role of kind of leadership among the leaders there. And why couldn't the Petrine authority move through this group and there be a valid development where then it moves to a singular bishop? And it's perfectly plausible explanation. There's no reason why it can't validly develop that way. But Protestant apologists have no interest whatsoever in considering that as a valid version of Catholicism. It's like to say, yeah, Robert Eno, great guy, great scholar, honest dude, love him on this, but and they don't say this, they might not even be thinking this, but I'm telling you, think about it, that you're basically saying, yeah, he's great, he's smart, he's honest, he knows his stuff, but he's also foolish. The stuff he's saying contradicts his own faith. He shouldn't be Catholic because he just disproved his own faith. Like, no, why don't you actually engage with the Catholicism of the people you cite? So I guess that might be the title of this video, something along those lines. Engage with the Catholicism that you cite, please. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Bye.